There's an interesting medrash that is brought by Rashi towards the end of Parashat Shalach. We know at the end of Parashat Shalach we have the mitzvah of tzitzis. Rashi says a well-known medrash. Shmoina chutin brings from Moshe Darshan. Shmoina chutin shebetzitzis keneged shmoina yomim sheshahu Yisrael mishayotzu miMitzrayim ad she'omru shira al hayom. Says Rav Moshe Darshan, the 8 strings in the tzitzis correspond to the 8 days between Yitzias Mitzrayim and when Klal Yisrael sang Shira. The obvious problem is that we know that there are only 7 days. This is a question that all the Mefarshei Rashi address, and many of them conclude that Kodem Matan Torah, we know the night came after the day, not before the day, and therefore Yom Yudalid was counted as day 1. If Yom Yudalid is counted as day 1, so then we have 8 days. A number of the Mefarshei Rashi conclude that that is what Rav Moshe Darshan was referring to. What I'm interested in, though, tonight is not how we calculate the 8 days, but what exactly does this mean? What does it mean that the 8 strings of the tzitzis in any way relate to the 8 days between Yitzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf? So to understand this, I'd like to present to you an halach from Reb Shlomo Fisher, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, a beautiful mahalach we've discussed in the past, and perhaps we could elaborate upon it. Shlomo Fisher writes as follows. We know a distinction that we focus on very often over the course of the Yom Tov of Pesach, in preparation for the Yom Tov of Pesach, is the distinction that the Brisker Rav makes when distinguishing between Shira and Hallel. There is something in Halacha referred to as Shira, and there's something in Halacha referred to as Hallel. Hallel is a formal singing, thanking of the Rabbi Shalom. It has many rules. Hallel must be done ba'amida. Hallel can't be done at night. Many different rules when it comes to Hallel. When it comes to Shira, on the other hand, all these rules fall by the wayside because the essence of Shira inherently is spontaneous. That's why Leil HaSeder were allowed to sing Hallel, or the words of Hallel, at night. I thought we don't say Hallel at night. We don't say Hallel sitting down. Because it's not Hallel, it's spontaneous in reaction to the nisim that we just experienced. Kol dar v'dar chayiv adam lireis es atzma ki ilu hu yotzim Mitzrayim. If one succeeds in that, so certainly he will feel that spontaneous need to break out in song. That is not referred to as Hallel, that is referred to as Shira. The distinction between Hallel and Shira. Shlomo Fisher suggests that this distinction, not only is it different in terms of the nature of how it is sung, but it is also a distinction in terms of who sings it. When it comes to Hallel, the formal singing, the formal non-spontaneous praise of the king, Lahavdil Elef Alfei Avdalas, that is done by those that are hired to do that for the king. Those are namely the Avodim. Hallel is sung primarily by Avodim. That's what the pasuk says. Hallelu Avdei Hashem. Hallel itself, that formal singing, the formal praise of the Rabbi Shalom, is upon the Avdei Hashem. When it comes to Shira, however, that spontaneous break out in song from an overwhelming experience or feeling, emotional experience of love, that is not upon the Eved. An Eved doesn't sing Shira. Rather, who sings Shira? A Ben sings Shira. V'loi kein hashira, shehaben oimer bifnei aviv. V'noivas mimima'ake halev, she'oiver al gidusov miroiv ava. A person's heart is simply gushing, overwhelmed with an expression of love. That is the relationship that is definitional to the relationship of father-son, and therefore while Hallel is sang by the Eved, Shira is sung by the son. What emerges, he argues, is that there is a very important transformation that occurred in terms of the nature of the relationship between Klal Yisrael and the Rabbeinu Shalom that occurred at Kriyas Yamsuf, but not at Kriyas Yamsuf in particular, but when Klal Yisrael sang the Shira. We often point out that the Sforno points out that the Yom Tov of Shvi Shel Pesach is in fact not a Yom Tov celebrating Kriyas Yamsuf, but it's a Yom Tov celebrating the Shira of Klal Yisrael. Why are we celebrating a Yom Tov of the Shira as opposed to a Yom Tov celebrating the actual miracle? Because the miracle, there are many miracles before that as well. What we're celebrating celebrating, when we celebrate the Shira Lefi this Mahalach, is a transformation in the relationship between Klal Yisrael and the Rabbeinu Shalom. They transformed themselves from Avdei Hashem, they transformed themselves into Bonim Lamakom. That was the transformation that took place the moment Klal Yisrael breaks out in Shira. Oz Yoshir Moshe, they are now considered, they feel a climax, and that relationship has been transformed to Bonim Lamakom. Once we understand this, so now we could take a step back and try to see how this relates to the mitzvah of tzitzis. We've pointed out many times in the past, Rabbi, that the mitzvah of tzitzis is a very unique mitzvah. The mitzvah of tzitzis, we know Chazal tell us, is shkula keneged kol HaMitzvos. Something very, very strange. Why is this mitzvah of tzitzis considered to be equivalent to all other mitzvahs? You want to tell me the mitzvah of Shabbos is equivalent to all other mitzvahs? I could understand. Shabbos is Brias HaOlam. It's the basic emunah in the Rabbeinu Shalom. There are many different mitzvahs. Rav Wolbe has a whole sefer talking about the mitzvahs which are mitzvahs hashkulos. But what about the mitzvah of tzitzis is considered to be shkula keneged kol hamitzvos? Why is it such an important mitzvah? We all know that theoretically a person didn't want to wear dalet kanfas, he wouldn't have to wear dalet kanfas. A person could live his entire life as a frum erlich yid and never be mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis. And this is the mitzvah you're going to tell me is shkula keneged kol hatayra kula? So we pointed out that the secret lies in a Gemara Meseches Menachos, where the Gemara tells us in Meseches Menachos something unique, and according to many Rishonim, it's unique about the mitzvah of tzitzis in particular. The Gemara says, "Be'idno derischa a'anshinon a'aseh." It is true that when it comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis, if a person doesn't wear dalet kanfas, according to most Rishonim, that's what the Gemara is saying. If a person doesn't wear dalet kanfas, he will not get any oynish. There's no obligation to wear dalet kanfas. Says the Gemara though, "Be'idno derischa," when the Rabbeinu Shalom is already upset at Klal Yisrael, be'idno derischa a'anshina na'aseh, the Rebbeinu Shalom will pile on an oynish for not wearing dalet kanfos, for not wearing tzitzis. What's the Gemara trying to tell us over here? I believe what the Gemara is saying over here is something very, very compelling and very fundamental. We know that generally speaking, we give more credence or more significance to a mitzvah which is incumbent upon it. Gadol mitzvah me'oisa yoiser mimi she'enu mitzvah yoiser. You take a look at the Gemara over there in Kedushin, Taisa says, why gadol mitzvah me'oisa yoiser mimi she'enu mitzvah yoiser? If I'm commanded to do it, so I'm not nearly as great as the person who's not commanded to do it. So Taisa says, no, because when you're commanded to do it, so there's a yetzer hara to not to do it. There's pressure, and that pressure gives you more schar. So from a certain perspective, no doubt, gadol mitzvah v'yoiser, yoiser mimi she'enu mitzvah v'yoiser. And therefore, that is how, in fact, we paskin. A person who is obligated takes precedence over a person who is not obligated. Yet, one can't deny the fact that there is a maila, there is an advantage to a person who is eno mitzvah. At the end of the day, you ask your wife to go out and buy, your wife asks you to go out and buy flowers, so you go out and buy flowers, you didn't do anything great, you just didn't get in trouble. If you go out on your own and buy flowers, so that's something which is considered to be chashuv. So yes, while the Gemara does say gadol mitzvah yoiser yoiser mi she'enu mitzvah yoiser, you can't deny the fact that there's a certain ahava, there's a certain love, there's a certain expression of love that is only expressed b'mi she'enoi mitzvah v'yoiser. So yes, in terms of the commitment to the Rabbeinu Shalom, gadol mitzvah v'yenu mi she'enu mitzvah v'yoiser. But there is something lacking. There is something greater about the person who's not mitzvah and goes out on their own, even though they don't have to, and is mekayim the mitzvah. Here comes the mitzvah of tzitzis. The mitzvah of tzitzis is unique in that the way that the Rabbeinu Shalom set it up, the way that the Torah set it up, it incorporates into itself two aspects. There is an aspect of enu mitzvah and an aspect of mitzvah. You have the maila, the advantage of einu mitzvah, together with the advantage of mitzvah. Because I don't have to put on dalet kanfos. It's my prerogative to put on dalet kanfos, and therefore it's an expression of ava like no other mitzvah. There's no other mitzvah where I get to opt in. The Rebbe Shalom calls, when it comes to tzitzis, you get to opt in. It is the singular mitzvah where you get to opt in, and therefore there's an expression of einu mitzvah yosa. But on the other hand, the moment you put on those dalet kanfos, the moment you wear the dalet kanfos, now you're mitzvah, now it's gadol mitzvah yosa. So you have wrapped into this mitzvah of tzitzis the ability to opt in, but once you opt in and you wear the dalet kanfos, now you're mitzvah, you have that pressure, you have the tension that gives the maila of mitzvah v'oiseh. So when it comes to the Gemara Menachos, there's something unique about the mitzvah tzitzis. Be'inna derischa anshina naaseh. This mitzvah, we're not going to hold you accountable because the Rebbeinu Shalom wasn't mitzvah. But you know why the Rebbeinu Shalom wasn't mitzvah? Because he wanted you to opt in on your own. So if you don't, we're not going to punish you. But be'inna derischa anshina naaseh. If you're not going to punish me, so why are you punishing me? The Rebbeinu Shalom is saying, there's a relationship of ahava. There is a relationship of father-son. And I would have given you rachmanas if you would have achieved that relationship. I would have protected you. But you opted out of that relationship. You do the mitzvahs that you have to do, nothing more. I gave you a mitzvah to express your ava to me where you could opt into the mitzvah, and you said, I'm not opting in. Be'inna derischa anshina naseh. This mitzvah of tzitzis shifts the relationship from a relationship of I do what I have to do. I'm an eved to melech. Now I'm not only doing what I have to do, I'm doing what I don't have to do. I'm opting in. It shifts it to a father-son relationship. The Rebbe Shalom says, I would have protected you. But now that you don't have the relationship of Av Ben, Be'inna Derischa, Anshinan Aseh. This is what it means that mitzvah of tzitzis is shkula keneged kol ha-mitzvahs kula. Because all the mitzvahs in the Torah, we could be perceived as simply avodim, doing what we have to do. The moment a person's mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis and he opts in, he's clearly expressing, I'm not doing the mitzvahs because I have to do them. I'm doing the mitzvahs because I want to do it, and that's why I'm opting in. It's reflective not merely on the mitzvah of tzitzis alone, but it's reflective on the entirety of kol ha-mitzvahs kula. That's what the Torah says. That's what Chazal say. Mitzvahs tzitzis and shkula keneged Torah. If you do the mitzvah tzitzis, you get more schar for every other mitzvah. If you don't do it, you're lacking in every mitzvah. It's definitional. It's defining the nature of the relationship between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Klal Yisrael. Is a relationship of avdus alone, where we do what we have to do and that's all, or is a relationship of banim lamakom, an extra ava that we do what we can do, not only what we have to. And you'll see throughout Shas that the mitzvah of tzitzis is in fact singled out very often for this reason. I'll give you one example, a beautiful example. Tosfos suggests in Meseches, in a few places in Shas, that the concept of loyeg l'rosh, we don't paskin like this, but the concept of loyeg l'rosh in front of a mace only applies to the mitzvah of tzitzis. You could dress a mace in shatnez. There's no problem of lo'eg l'rosh. When you go in, you have to tuck in your tzitzis. Only when it comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis is a concept of lo'eg l'rosh. Why would that be? So the idea is as follows. A mace is not chayiv in mitzvahs, and therefore, what's the mace jealous about? We have to do things. He doesn't have to do that. Mace in chavshim in a mitzvahs. It's only when it comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis where we are able to do even that we're not obligated, and when the mace can't do it, and the mace says, I'm potter for mitzvahs. Yeah, but even when you're potter, you're able to do mitzvahs. That's when the mace is jealous, and that's why the mitzvah of tzitzis is unique. This is what's definitional to the mitzvah of tzitzis, why it's so significant, specifically because it incorporates within it both the avdus and the banim. The aspect of banim that we're opting in, we're doing everything we can, even though we don't have to do it, and the moment we opt in and put on our dalet kanfos, that's when we become mechuyev, like a mitzvah v'oiseh. This explains Reb Shlomo Fisher, perhaps what it means when Chazal tell us that the mitzvah of tzitzis, the 8 strings on the tzitzis, are keneged the 8 days in between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf. What does this mean? Because the mitzvah of tzitzis has the component of banim lamakayim as well as avodim lamakom. And it's mefurish in the Gemara. The Gemara tells us in Menachos Mem Gimel Amud Beis, Gadol oinshel shel lavan yoiser me oinshel shel tchelis. The punishment of not wearing lavan is even worse than the punishment of not wearing tchelis. Moshel ma'adav doim, says the Gemara, Melech basav adam sha'amar l'shnei avodim le'echad amar havli choisim shel tit. Bring me a signet of plaster. Le'echad amar havli choisim shel zav. Bring me a signet of gold. Pashu shnei v'lo eviva ezmehen oinshel meruba. What's the Gemara saying over here? A melech tells his Eved, one Eved, he says, bring me a signet of a seal to show that you're mine, and it's made out of tit. And one he says, bring me a seal that should show me that you're mine, and it's made out of gold. Says the Gemara, the seal of tit, that is considered the white strings of the tzitzis. The seal of gold is the tcheles of the tzitzis. The white strings of the tzitzis, says Taisis, is a seal of tit. Who wears a seal of tit? An Eved. The blue strings of the tzitzis are the seal of gold. Who wears a seal of gold? Says the Gemara over there, a ben wears a seal of gold. So within this mitzvah of tzitzis, you have both the aspect of mitzvah v'yoyse ve'ena mitzvah v'yoyse, bonim and avodim. White strings keneged the avdos, the blue strings, the tcheles, keneged the bonim. And this is in fact, if you take a look at the chinuch says that the white strings are keneged the guf, and the blue strings, the tcheles, are keneged the neshama. Why? Because kol ha-neshama tehalel ka. We said only a ben is able to sing shira. The neshama is able to sing shira. So within this mitzvah of tzitzis, we have two aspects, and that's what makes it greater than any other mitzvah. We have the aspect of avodim together with the aspect of bonim. We have the maila of avodim, mitzvah v'yoyse, together with the maila of bonim, of ava, of opting in to a particular mitzvah. That's what the mitzvah of tzitzis corresponds to. The entirety, the fullness of our relationship with the Rabbi Shalom, the dual aspect. That on the one hand we're avodim, on the other hand we are bonim. When did we go through this transformation? We went through this transformation over the course from the days from Yetzias Mitzrayim through our day where we sing Shira. When we sang Shira, so then finally we climax as Banim Lamakom. This is what Ramosha Darshan means. Ramosha Darshan says these 8 strings are connected the 8 days. Why? Because we have a mitzvah over here. The 7 strings correspond to the aspect, 7 white strings, Lefi the Shita of the Rambam, correspond to the aspect of Avdus. For those 7 days, we were only Avodim Lamakom. We raised ourselves in our relation to the Rabbeinu Shalom day after day after day, until finally on the 8th day we were able to sing Shira. Through our ability to sing Shira, become Banim Lamakom. That's represented by the blue string, the string of Techelis. And this is of course what Chazal mean when they say that the blue string is Keneged Yamsuf. Doesn't only mean, it reminds us that the Rebbe Shalom is Keneged Kriyas Yamsuf itself, because that's what spurred the Shira that ultimately defined this relationship of Banim Lamakom. This is probably one approach which is very likely the understanding that Moshe Darshan had for us when he said that the 8 strings are connected, these 8 days. What do the 8 strings have to do with the 8 days between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf? These 8 days represent the mitzvah of tzitzis. These 8 strings represent this aspect, the dual nature of the relationship, the aspect of Avdos, and how we build on the Avdos to become a Ben. We don't ignore the Avdos and change it to a Ben. We maintain the aspect of Avdos, build on it to become Bonim, dual, both Vodim and Bonim Lamakoim, and that was a relationship which was created and forged over the course of those 8 days. Ramosha Darshan says, realize every day you put on tzitzis, Be'ezus Hashem, you put on tzitzis with tcheles. You put on tzitzis with tcheles, realize it represents the relationship of avodim, and how we build on that relationship, turn it into bonim. That's what happened to Klal Yisrael over the course of those 8 days. Reb Chananya ben Akasha Oimer,